Hi, everyone. This is Laura Womack from Never Too Late Cafe, the sponsor of Bloom Where You're Planted podcast. Today, I have a special guest, and I'm going to have her introduce herself and tell you where she lives.
Hi, I'm Jill Baker, and I live in Louisville, Kentucky. I live in a historic home, but right next door is an empty lot that we had. And so I built a nice studio, art studio on that I designed. And we built it to be a net zero, very ecologically friendly studio. It has 22 solar panels on the roof. And so I supply all of my energy. Everything in it is electric. It's 1,400 square feet, and it has lots of huge, huge windows. And it has a kitchen and a bedroom and a bathroom off of a great big studio space. And double doors in the front. It's also handicap accessible in the back. Everything is made for the future. So that's where I spend 8 hours a day painting and writing.
Oh, wonderful. So that was my next question, was that you're an artist and also an author. And so how did it come about, since we're talking about your studio, how did it come about to be, what do you call it, net zero?
Net zero.
Yes.
That means that you produce as much or more than the energy that you use. In other words, when it comes down to the balance line, the bottom line, you are producing as much or more energy than you are using. And so 22 solar panels can produce a lot of energy. And I usually produce much more energy than I use in this building. Everything is LED lights. Everything is designed to be user-friendly, electrical. In other words, the hot water heater is on demand. Everything is designed to use less energy.
So how did that come about that you decided to do that? Eco-friendly, futuristic.
Yeah, that was interesting. I have always dreamed of the perfect studio. Since I'm an artist, one of the things that I started doing when I was a young housewife, just working in a bedroom, as a studio, and I began to draw my perfect studio, what I would really like to have with big windows, on the north side and so forth. And so I started drawing it. And as the years went by and I rented spaces, I went to artist housing and rented studio spaces and did things like that as I lived in different places. I began to perfect the perfect studio, and so I did. So when Lee said, let's build you a studio rather than renting a space, we were able to take the empty lot and build a studio on that lot. And I found a construction guy that was very interested in ecological, climate change friendly type of building. And everything in this building was designed by him. That is, the materials that he used are ecologically beneficial to climate change. And he put on the solar panels. That was included in the cost of building. And all of the insulation, just everything about the whole building, he knew what to do.
So the walls are called a SIP, S-I-P?
Yes.
I don't recall what that stands for.
I don't remember either, but it is...
they're huge panels?
Yes. Huge panels that are about almost a foot thick, of foam inside, and the outsides of them are, they're not a foot. They're more like 8 inches thick foam. Outsides are presswood or plywood, and then you can build onto the walls, of course, that way. And they're delivered in one piece. each wall is, you draw it carefully and you design the holes for the doors and the windows. You put them in exactly the right spot and they deliver them. And they just stand them up, lay them on the ground, stand them up, seal them at the corners, and you've got a house.
I know you mentioned Lee is your fiance, also a relative of mine. That's how I met you. And so I know that you're not from Louisville originally, correct?
That's correct, yeah. I met Lee 50 years ago, though, when I was living in Bowling Green, Kentucky. He was a poet. He had published several books, and he saw some illustrations that I had done for a book of Jim Wayne Miller's and some other poets in Bowling Green. I had illustrated their books, and he decided that he wanted this illustrator to design illustrations for his book, and so they asked me. And I said, yes, I would be happy to do that. So I've been illustrating his books ever since. That was 50 years ago.
Oh my gosh. So,
yeah.
And so what do you call your home state, your hometown?
Well, I don't really have a hometown because I was born in New York. My father and mother were up there for a short time during the war. He worked at an arms plant building rifles. But then he was recruited to work on the atomic bomb since he had recently graduated with a degree in engineering, and they needed engineers to work on the bomb. So he was recruited. He was sent to Richland, Washington, and we moved there. We moved around from then on. We worked for GE. He worked for GE.
Tell me a little bit about the types of art that you do.
Yeah, I was trained in oil painting when I went to college. I went to Baylor University, and we learned how to paint oils. And I had actually been painting in oils from early in high school, but all my life I've been an artist. From the age of 2, my mother said. I started drawing at 2, and she couldn't keep enough paper in the house. I used up all the paper and pencils, but I had been doing oil painting. And then when I went to graduate school, I started doing collage, which is another kind of mixed media, you might say, using paper and other kinds of maybe fabric, one-dimensional type things, and you glue them onto a panel and make a picture of it. My paintings became very surrealistic.
So that term, could you explain for us what that term means?
Sure. Surreal is where you have odd things in conjunction with each other, things that would not normally be in conjunction with each other. If you've ever had a dream where you were, say, in a swimming pool and this elephant comes up to you, that's surreal. It's not real, but it seems to be real in your dream.
Yeah, that's true.
So the paintings that I did were of houses out in the woods, okay? But these houses were made of very odd things like butterflies. There was a house made of butterflies. There was a house made of ice and glass. Another painting was a house made out of car parts. But they were these like 3-story houses, and they all were inhabited by some woman, and she was peeking out the window. So these were my paintings. I did about 40 of them, and they were all houses of different kinds, very funny kind of houses, but they were so real. They looked so real that people would ask me, where did I take a picture of that?
Wow.
So, yeah. So that was the kind of painting I was doing at the time.
So you do, that's your freelance work that you do. And so you have some paintings on exhibit and have for many years. Can you give us a little story about how you started exhibiting your works?
Well, I'm like many other artists, and you're invited to be in shows. and your school usually will have an exhibit. And then when I got to Bowling Green, and was married, I started showing in weekend fairs, art fairs here and there during the summer. And it was a lot of fun. And I could do portraits. I did 10-minute portraits. I must have done thousands and thousands of 10-minute portraits of people. And they were very popular. And I would make a lot of money on the weekends. I would also have my paintings up at the same time behind me. And people would sometimes buy paintings. And so that's how I kind of got started in exhibiting.
So, and then you also do commissioned work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pets, people, what all?
Right. Well, from that start of painting the portraits on the weekends, I then branched into painting oil paintings, portraits, which were more long lasting, you might say, because you could hand them down to your grandchildren even, right? They should last a few thousand years. And so I started doing oil paintings, which are much longer lasting. And actually, I spend more time on them. They're more perfect, you might say, than a quick sketch in a art fair.
So tell us a little bit about the places that you've lived. Baylor was in Texas.
Yes.
And then New York.
Yes. I decided that I needed to have graduate work in order to teach. I wanted to teach on the college level or any level, actually. I just wanted to teach art. So I applied to graduate schools. The first two schools I applied to were the top schools in the nation. That's what people usually do. You apply to the top ones and then you start going down. So I applied to the University of Chicago and I applied to Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. Well, I was accepted to Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. I didn't know at the time, but they only take 20 people a year. And out of the thousands of people, they did choose me. So I didn't realize how fortunate I was until I got there. And I saw the list of people that were my cohorts, the other students that had been accepted with me. And I said, wow, is that all? And they said, yes. Don't you feel lucky now?
One of the chosen.
Yeah. So I got a really good education at Pratt. And meanwhile, I had lived in various places or even around the world. And when I lived in Florence, Italy, I went to the Accademia di Belle Arti, which is the art school in Florence, Italy. And I took some painting classes there. When I was in Florida at Western Kentucky University, I actually entered their graduate program and took constructive design and did painting under Carl Zerbe, who is a famous Bauhaus artist. So I studied there. I also lived in Los Angeles. And while I was there, I took some education courses because I wanted to know how to teach better at UCLA.
Wow, you've got an extensive education. And so where did you teach at? I know that you taught for many years.
Yes, I taught for about 17 years altogether because I got a late start. But I taught for the University of Phoenix first. I taught for Nossi College of Art in Nashville. I was living in Nashville at the time. And I taught for Pierce College in California. I taught for the Institute of Art in Nashville, which is a very highly regarded school of art. And then when I moved to Indiana, I taught for the University of Southern Indiana. I was on their faculty. I don't know, I may still be on their faculty, but I taught for them for many years.
So besides Lee Pennington as book illustrations, have you done other illustrations as well?
Oh, yes. I've illustrated books for all kinds of people. And One of the things that I did learn was Photoshop and Illustrator and other computer art programs, graphic art. I got a lot of that at Pratt Institute, but then I also worked at Vanderbilt, and they sent me to advanced workshops. So I learned how to do graphic arts very well. And so I have several different styles, you might say. People think that an artist will have one style and that's what they're known for. Well, that may be true. But if you look at Leonardo da Vinci, you look at Michelangelo, you look at any Dali, you look at any of the better known artists of the ages, they worked in many mediums and they had several different styles. Michelangelo was a sculptor. He was an architect. He also did paintings and he did drawings and murals. I mean, he did a lot of different kinds of things. He didn't just do one thing. And to expect an artist to do one thing and do it over and over and over again and the same formula is, I think, doing a great disservice to the artist. It's squelching their creativity. And an artist likes to be free to use other medias, to do all kinds of things. So I work on the computer as well as in paints and in watercolor and in collage. So I just, these are my different medias that I love to work in. It's fun for me.
And you're an author as well.
Well, creativity just kind of runs in my blood, I guess. And when I was in high school, and actually earlier than that, I was writing short stories because stories just popped into my head and I would write them down. So I started writing in high school. I was encouraged to write, and eventually it just came like second nature to write, and I write every day. I've kept a diary since I was 13 years old, every day. And so I write every day in that diary, and I write a whole page. Sometimes my diary would go to maybe 30 pages a day. It depended on the situation. When I was in stressful times, like when I moved to New York, I was poverty stricken. I didn't have any money. I had a child. I was, a single mom. And I wrote a lot because it was this very stressful situation. And I basically just wrote down all my feelings and what I was going through when I was during that stressful time. And so I have always written. And when you write a lot, you begin to be very efficient in your use of words. In other words, you can say a lot with just a few words. And so I started doing that. And I have written 3 books that are on the market right now, and I'm in the process of writing another book right now.
Amazing. So words of wisdom you might have for someone that, artist, writer, what would you share with some of our audience about having the same interest that you have had?
Well, I think that one of the problems that I had to face as a creative person, writing or painting, was procrastination was a big problem. So what I had to learn to do was to just walk into the area where I had to work first thing in the morning. Say, you give yourself a schedule. You walk in at 9:00, say, and you pick up a brush or you sit down at your computer or whatever, and suddenly the time just goes away. And you can work. When I was a young housewife, I had children there, but they just kind of like played around me and they adapted to my lifestyle. They also became very creative, by the way. Maybe from example, just seeing someone working hard every day is good for children. Just go ahead and walk into your studio and into your office, into wherever it is, first thing in the morning, as soon as you can, and do not have other distractions around you that are going to pull you away. If you want to, turn your phone off. Don't look at email. Don't look at Facebook because that'll suck all of the creativity out of you for a couple hours at least. And just do that. And it's like a discipline. And if you start doing that, eventually you just continue doing it. And you can get a lot done then.
Wow, those are powerful words. I know what you're saying about Facebook. It can, you can start to check a few things and then a few hours later you go, where did the time go?
Yes.
It happens. Well, this podcast is called Bloom Where You're Planted. So you've lived multiple places. And so what does that phrase, that quote mean to you?
Well, actually, I was just talking with that about that with my daughter, who has a son who had a particular talent, and he was not accepted in his small town because he was different from the other boys. He was a skateboarder, and they could, as they got older, they could care less about skating every day, say that. Well, when he got to be older, he realized he couldn't be a professional skateboarder in the small town where he lived. So he had to move to a big town. Well, now he has planted himself in Los Angeles and he is blooming. So bloom where you're planted could mean you can plant yourself somewhere else if you really want to. If you are being you're being squelched, your talent is not being recognized or used where you are, go where you will be recognized and bloom there. And he's a happy boy now. He is doing everything that he ever dreamed of doing. He's not even 20 years old yet, and he's already a recognized professional skateboarder.
Amazing. Those are wonderful words. And so what's next for Jill Baker? You said your book.
Yes, I'm working on a science fiction book, and it should be done within the next year, and hopefully will be coming out on the market. It's already been accepted by a publisher. So all I have to do is write it. I'm on chapter 3, so it's moving along.
Wonderful. Well, listen, as our time comes to close, I want to say thank you so much for sharing your words of wisdom, all about your talent and it's just, it's been quite an honor to have you as a guest. We'll be signing off now. This is Laura Womack from Never Too Late Cafe, which sponsors Bloom Where You're Planted podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. Bye now.
Bye-bye.